Hey, what's up, YouTube? How's you talks? You know where we're at, the wood shop. Um, got a few notes for today. I'll go over a couple things. Um, almost a new year. It's exciting. Hoping that 2023 is like the best year of my life, to be quite honest with you. 2022, despite some illnesses and whatnot, ended up being a really blessed year for me. And I'm really excited for the future. So, started working out a little bit, trying to get in a little better shape, trying to eat a little healthier. Realize that I'm in my late 40s now and not in the best of health. Got all kinds of diseases and mental illness and depression running in my family. Somehow I escaped most of that so far, but kind of like tempting fate, if you will, I guess. So with that said, first thing I want to talk about today, and it'll kind of make sense. Well, I'll start off with the daily distraction. All right, daily distraction. What's in the news? Probably the biggest story today is that Donald Trump's taxes were released. And guess what? Guess what we learned? We learned nothing. They're exactly what they thought we'd be. He paid very little. He paid very little federal income taxes because of his losses and because he paid a lot of money to some really good accountants who know tax law. And you can, I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that would look at those numbers and be like, that's unfair. I pay this, I pay that. I think pretty much some years I paid more than he paid. And he was, a billionaire. But whatever. I'm not, can't hate the player, right? Gotta just hate the game or learn to play the game by their rules. But yeah, so his taxes got released, and that's like the biggest story. Democrats are using that. The House wants to do the House or the Senate, somebody wants to do an investigation now to see if there's any kind of fraud or whatnot. But again, we're 6 years or 7 years deep into Trump-orama, if you will, and investigation after investigation after accusation after investigation, and so far no indictments and no charges have been filed. Not even for January 6th, not even for the insurrection, right? That he orchestrated. They got nothing. It's the largest, it's got to be the single biggest waste of taxpayer funds now that we've ever seen. And as I don't want to get into politics a whole lot tonight, but everybody's involved. All the big players from both parties. As I said, the two parties, Democrats and Republicans, or the GOP and the DNC, however you want to call it that, two wolves and a sheep trying to decide what's for dinner. It's all it is. They're playing the same game. They just are using different talking points for their constituents, if you will. But don't kid yourself. They don't give a shit about us. So the biggest distraction is clearly Trump's taxes. And nothing's going to come of it. It's just people are going to talk about it. It's going to be tomorrow at the water coolers. People are going to be like, can you imagine? Can you believe? Blah, blah, blah. Most of the country's jealous. Some of the country's angry. Some of the country's happy. Whatever, for it. But it's just to get your mind off the, hey, look over here. That's all it is. The next biggest story in the news today is going to be, I'm gonna go with the sweetheart deal for Sam Bankman-Fried, or whatever his name is. Lucky he's going to the same prison as Epstein. And I don't know if he's going to the same prison that Epstein killed himself in, or if he's going to the same prison that Epstein served time in on that work release thing. I'm assuming that that's what they mean, because somehow he got a plea deal for this, for these billions of dollars in fraud. He got a plea deal. Remember, they didn't offer I forget his name, the dude that had that Ponzi scheme back in, I don't know, maybe it was during the crash of the last economy in 2008, 2009. I can't remember his name though. Bernanke? No. Ben Bernanke was the Federal Reserve Chairman. I can't remember his name, but you know who I'm talking about. He, he had like $700 million fraud thing with his Ponzi scheme, and I think they tried to get him for life in prison, and they're talking about this Sam Bankman-Fried, you know, is getting a plea deal, and he might only serve like a year, and it might be light, light serving. Like he might be able to come and go as he pleases, you know. He'll probably start another goddamn crypto business while he's, serving his prison sentence. Excuse me. Next thing, biggest distraction, and you're not hearing a lot about this in the news, and you actually never hear a lot about this person in the news, but they are talking about it now, and it's pretty interesting. It has a little bit to do with Twitter, maybe. He had a little Twitter battle with, Greta Thunberg or whatever her name is. You know, how dare you? The how dare you chick, the one who flies around on private jets herself now, preaching to the world about how the earth is dying and we should be doing more, you know. And I'm going to say this, and again, not to get too deep into it. You want America to be responsible for the climate change, and we're supposedly the ones who are supposed to lead the charge. And that's all fine and good if that's what has to happen, but it's only going to happen if all the other countries are involved. You can't tell me that India and China, who are still developing nations, and they don't have to abide by any rules as far as the environment's concerned until 2050. The Earth will be dead by then. You know, at that rate, they're spewing more emissions than no matter what we did. If we became carbon negative for 100 years, we couldn't fix what they're doing from a pollution standpoint, and they don't even have to start implementing anything until 2050. So it's all horseshit. You know, it's going to be another thing. It's a carbon tax that they're trying to put together so that we can start paying our government for, the right to drive our cars, even more so than the driver's licenses and the insurance and the registrations and the inspections and all the stuff that goes along with driving a car. Now you're basically going to have like an HOA for the environment, and we got to pay taxes based on that. But yeah, so he had a Twitter spat with Greta Thunberg or whatever over the climate, I guess. It was pretty short. It was funny, a little bit comical. But he's in the news because Romanian police got tipped off that he was human trafficking. Ironic. Him and his brother were both arrested. And I don't know, I guess indicted is the word. They're not necessarily charged yet, but they are like suspected of human trafficking of minors or something like that. Which isn't that ironic that they're going after him. And I wonder if they're going to have they're probably going to have, I don't think it's true. Because I think he's actually already out on bail. And, obviously has denied the charges. But they did this a few months ago. Remember when that video leaked of him having a rough session with that girl? And everybody said he was a woman beater. And then it turns out that woman came out and went, no, it's just how I like it. And, and then all of a sudden he got canceled off of everything. Well, he's out there and he's kind of like, I'm going to say he's been making a comeback, even though he's still canceled off everything. But he's been doing interviews. He did a couple of interviews with Piers Morgan. And he's been doing a whole lot of like stuff, responding to people. I thought he's canceled off Twitter, but maybe Elon. Oh yeah, Elon put him back on. So he's been kind of going off on Twitter a little bit on some people and whatnot. And it's just all funny stuff, pretty comical. And he's got some opinions that I think are way out there, honestly. But he also has some things that I think make sense. Um, and one of the things, like I said, he's being accused of human sex trafficking of a minor, I believe. Um, so we'll see what it comes of that, but I doubt anything will come of it. I think they're just using it for the distraction. Um, Maybe they need it because this weekend Ghislaine is gonna, you know, commit suicide with a few sheets of toilet paper that she hung herself with, or something. It's just another daily distraction, as I call them. Look over here while we do this thing. Um, but Andrew Tate, again, I'm not a giant fan of him. I think a lot of the stuff is satirical and just comical, really. Some of it makes sense. I'd like to, we could have another talk about it one day, and maybe break down some of the things that he says and talk about what they actually mean, and not just look at the verbiage and the way that it's said. But I do believe in the idea of a woman being. I mean, my wife is a high value woman. Faithful, beautiful. Um, Good mother, raised our kids. Um, Definitely had some promiscuity before I met her and whatnot, as do most people. I don't think it really um, devalued her. I think if anything, at the time she didn't value herself, um, and was looking for attention, and she was young, and that frontal lobe thing wasn't fully developed yet. So where people make bad decisions and whatnot, and she settled right down when we met, and we've been happily married for 24 years or 25 years. We have three great kids ourselves. Now we have two grandkids. Um, but there's something to be said about a high value woman, a woman who, if anything else, if you talk to my wife and you try to insult her or say something negative, she's going to put you in her place for the most part, and tell you how she feels and whatnot, because she values herself and she values her own principles and morals enough that she's just not going to let you walk all over her. And I respect that. And also, as a husband, I think it's funny to fight the fight, to be quite honest with you. Sometimes I just got to be a dick for the sake of being a dick, you know. But she puts up with all my bullshit. And she puts up with this mess that I've become. God bless her for that. Another reason why I'd like to lose weight, because nobody should deserve to be. I believe that we're all. This is gonna sound terrible, but I do believe that we're all like I'm not what I was when we met. How's that? I'm a completely different thing now. I'm better in some ways, but I'm worse in some ways. And if we had met today and I was in this shape, I wouldn't. I don't think I could hold it against her, like not wanting to date me or be together. Honestly, I'm not. I'm not of high value in my current um, shape. I'm pretty high value because of my business and my work ethic and my drive and my determination and the money and that we can make doing the things that we do, from that perspective. But I'm not high value in my physical attributes and my body and whatnot. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being considered or striving to be a high value product. And I can understand when a woman, is just out there sleeping around, killing time, not valuing herself, how it could bring down her value. I mean, like in reality, most wars fought throughout history were fought over basically women and money and power, right? Women, money, and power. The things that men desire when they get wealthy are power, women, and more money. I mean, so it always boils down to that. I mean, there were some religious things, but even in religion, Whatever. We'll get into that another day. Um, so, you know, he's got some opinions that people feel are out there and a little sexist and misogynistic and blah, 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 and all the words, all the big words that you can use to make somebody sound really bad. He checks all the boxes. I'm sure his pronouns are like pig, chauvinist, misogynist, rapist, you know, like whatever. Like that's just what it is. That's people just they talk, you know, but one of the things that people accuse him of is toxic masculinity. That's the thing that he preaches about masculinity and why it's so important in the world. And masculinity is also is one of the driving forces that I believe makes men high value. A man who's a sweet, soft, masculine man, able to do things, able to accomplish things, build things with his hands, do things with his hands, you know, strong, set in his ways, set in his value system and his principles and whatnot, who's masculine, you know what I mean? Like I remember when I was a young boy, I felt safe around my dad because my dad was super masculine. I think that in general, people feel safe around masculine men, unless they're aggressively masculine and they're always, you know, bringing people down or tearing people apart, which, you know, sometimes Andrew Tate's a little guilty of some of that. You know, he can take things too far, as with some people, you know. He's a little bit of Alex Jones about masculinity, as Alex Jones was about, you know, fluoride or the thing turning the frogs gay. You know what I'm saying? That's all. You just take it a step too far, say it a little too hard for a little too long. You know what I mean? But I don't really believe that there's an outbreak or like an epidemic proportion of toxic masculinity out there. And I do think that most people and most women, and you know, I mean, even if you look at homosexual relationships, right? Two men, usually in that relationship, one of the men typically is more masculine than the other. And I'll bet you it makes the one who's not as masculine feel safer, right? It's just part of the gig of being a man. When I hold my granddaughters, I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel untouchable, that nobody on this earth could get to them or hurt them because this man is holding them. You know, I think that that's a blessing, honestly. And so, you know, there's all this talk about toxic masculinity and how dangerous it is for society, and there's these movements about it. And I kind of like, I don't know if I coined it, I'm sure I'm not the first person to say it, but it occurred to me one day. For one, I've said this in the past, and, you know, I believe that I'm an empath, if you know what that is. I'm like, I have the ability, I can pick up on like the tension or the feeling in a room when I walk into a room. People are angry or people are sad or people are, there's a lot of hostility or there's a lot of animosity. There's some things going on. As soon as I walk in the room, it hits me like a brick. Like I'm become completely aware and tuned into where the energy is coming from. Sometimes it's painful for me to watch TV or watch a TV show or watch, you know, any kind of thing where somebody like is doing something embarrassing or, you know, or even when I watch like these documentaries of these like drug users or these scumbag parents and stuff. Like literally, I feel physical pain in a sense when I watch some of this stuff or I hear some of this stuff. Because again, I'm an empath. I absorb, on some level, I absorb those feelings that the people are putting out there, and it like physically like bothers me, physically hurts sort of on a level. Can't watch it sometimes, have to turn away. You know, and it's a blessing in a lot of ways to like be an empath, if you will, but it's also it's got its downsides as well. Like you're just it can be exhausting in an area or in a situation where there's a lot of anger or sadness or hostility, and your body's trying to fight that off. As an empath, I'm trying to live in peace and have peace around me. And if I'm in a thing where it's just hostile and messed up, it can become exhausting. It can wear my brain out in a sense. Like my brain is constantly in motion and constantly thinking about stuff, and it can just literally wear me out. But I think that sometimes it can go too far, and you can have what I call toxic empathy. And I think toxic empathy is kind of like when when you like when you're virtuous, or you think that you're virtuous, and you take on this cause because you want to be empathetic to the struggle or the plight of what somebody or what a group or whatever is going through. And, you're empathizing with them could literally turn to violence. You can literally resort to violence because of your empathy. You saw that a lot during the 2019 and 2020. The a lot of the protests that were out west, and the Occupy the thing in Seattle, and the Black Lives Matter protests, and even that protest in I think it was South Carolina, where that car ran through the crowd and killed that person. That protest, or any of these protests where you see the vast majority of people at the protest aren't even per se the people affected by the struggle. Like, you go to any common city in America, you know what I mean, and look at I'm going to use the one that I'm most familiar with is the Black Lives Matter movement. And I wholeheartedly agree Black Lives Matter. Like, and they certainly have a leg to stand on. Their movement and their mission and what they were about could certainly be virtuous and necessary. But it got twisted. Some of it got twisted and messed up, and the leaders of it got greedy and embezzled a bunch of money and donations and bought houses. The whole meanwhile standing there on TV talking about you gotta have the good fight and do and fight back and do this and raise hell and have a protest and burn the buildings and burn the businesses and shut down the cities and all this stuff they were doing. Why? Because the protesters that were there weren't even African Americans for the most part. They were like, it was like Antifa. They were like young, late teenager, early 20s people not working, probably still living with their parents, maybe in school, maybe not in school, really nothing going on in life in a sense. They were the people. They were the people who they had so much empathy for the African Americans and their plight and what they've gone through, that it was these Antifa members and these people, as I described, these Caucasian female or male with dyed hair and running around there with fists in the air and helping people flip over cars and light buildings on fire and defund the police and all of that virtue signaling that went on during all those protests. And they weren't even affected by anything that the people who created Black Lives Matter were affected by. I'm not talking about, African Americans being out there protesting. By all means, of course, necessary. You should be heard. People need to be heard. And some changes surely have to be made. But there's a lot of people in those protests that really, I want to say, should have been in that protest, you know? It's like when you had the Roe versus Wade turnover and you had all those protests happening and you had people out front of the Supreme Court justices' houses protesting, which, you know, shouldn't even be legal. They should be able to arrest those people. That's, you know, borderline insurrection, I would say, as well, especially when they're threatening the lives of the Supreme Court justices. But a lot of them were men. And I'm not saying that men can't support, but men should support women and their right from afar. They don't need to be right in the dirt. They don't need to be running around with their pink hats on. You know what I mean? Being toxically empathetic, you know, and looking to incite violence and whatnot. Because that's what it is, you know. People are like, I guess when you get people together, you get a group of people together, it's scary, you know. You get a group of enraged, virtue signaling people together with some kind of half-assed mission thing that they're trying to do. You get one person who's a rather smooth speaker who's able to get people riled up. And all of a sudden, like, our old tribal instincts kick in and we become like a pack of wild dogs. And who knows what's gonna happen? People get hit in the head with bike locks, cars get set on fire, shatter all the buildings in front of the Starbucks, like blah, 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 blah. That's how it happens. One person or two people or five people amp that thing up and talk that thing and speak it into existence until it's a chaotic scene, and, you know, lots of bad things are happening. And all of that began from an empathetic movement, right? Empathy. Because you were so empathetic to the plight of this thing or that thing that you had to go down there and join the protest, and you believed in the leadership who was ranting and raving and saying all these things and getting everybody riled up. And then they said, we got to show them, we got to teach them a lesson. And next thing you know, someone's dead, buildings are destroyed, millions of dollars worth of damage to the city, cop cars destroyed, like, and because of your empathy. I believe that that's toxic empathy. I mean, there's a time and a place, and there's a way to do these things. I personally can't protest because I have a job and I have to work. And so, like, as much as sometimes I believe in a cause, you know what I mean? I'd like to, I protest from afar. I support from afar, you know? And I'm going to put my family first anyway. I'm going to do the thing that I got to do, you know? All right, that's all I have on the toxic empathy versus toxic masculinity. Last thing, good news. Happy to hear this, actually, because it's been pissing me off. They caught the Idaho killer who killed those 4 students. Not thank God, because, like, what a tragedy that these 4 students had to die in the horrific manner that they did. And it took so long for the police to even, like, come up with a suspect. And even up until today, they weren't announcing that they even had a person of interest. But basically there's been like a manhunt, they said, going on. So I don't really know what transpired, and I'm sure we'll get some half-ass reporting on it. It's probably tomorrow will be part of the Daily Distraction, because it's kind of like a win-win story, you know? Oh yeah, justice will be served, you know? That'll probably be one of the videos or one of the trials that will be, available to the public. You'll be watching that when that thing goes to trial. Depending on how the guy pleads, and that'll be live feed, TV, cameras in the courtroom, blah blah blah. We'll get all that, you know. But thank goodness for the families. They can put these people in the ground and move on with their lives. Tragically, it's terrible to say it that way, but at least there's some kind of closure now. And it's not just like you don't know why your daughters or your son or whatever who murdered him. Could it happen again? You know. Last thing is you know, to rehash old stuff. Let's go, Brandon. Not in a recession. Remember, we changed the definition of recession. But 2022 ended today down. Well, no, ends tomorrow. But today was the last day of trading. It's the worst year that we've had from a financial standpoint in the markets since 2008. And yet our government, our supreme leadership is just out there, plugging along like, no, things are great. Best economy, best growth, best jobs report, even though the jobs reports were a lie, blah, blah, blah. But that's it for tonight, YouTube. Thanks for joining me. Please like and subscribe. If you like my content, share my videos with your friends, family, and anybody else. I don't mean to come across as offensive or say anything. My intention is not to hurt anybody. I don't want anybody to take anything that I said out of context and think that I'm any kind of racist or bigot or homophobe or any of that. I'm not. I do have some opinions about, stuff and First Amendment. I believe I can sort of say what I want, not yelling fire in a crowded movie theater, not doing anything to hurt anybody. I'm not even trying to spread a message. I'm just trying to shine light on things, on hypocritical things that are happening in the world, and some things that are in the news and some things that aren't in the news. And I want to point out the things that are in the news and they're not in the news, and then question why it is, And if you have the answers to any of these things, I'm just laying them out there. If somebody has the answers to why these things are the way they are, please enlighten me, Let's have some dialogue about it. If I ever get big enough on YouTube, I will, without a doubt, do live streams where people can, talk to me and school me then, or we could have a community or a group of people come together and talk about this kind of stuff. And maybe seek some change, maybe create a movement where we're trying to get term limits instituted by our government for all the politicians, But that's it. Have a good night, YouTube. Thanks.